My name is Dr. Alina Vance. I am 34 years old and exactly 8 months ago, on the night of the annual Tech Founders Gala, my wealthy brother discovered precisely where I had been living. I was not residing in the luxury, five-star Alpine rehabilitation clinic he had been financing for the better part of a year. I had been living in an abandoned, foreclosed commercial basement on the industrial outskirts of the city. A rusted, damp concrete vault measuring 12 by 14 feet, equipped with a broken space heater, exposed, leaking copper pipes, and a single flickering fluorescent bulb that hummed aggressively whenever it rained. For 8 excruciating months, my brother Marcus had been transferring his wife, Olivia, exactly $15,000 every single month. 8 months, $120,000 intended for an elite physical rehabilitation facility, private physical therapists, and sterile, accessible living quarters. I never saw a single medical professional. I never touched the high thread count sheets of a private recovery suite. Olivia had systematically fabricated an entire medical institution. She generated fraudulent admission documents using sophisticated graphic design software. She intercepted and manipulated my medical records. She created a fake patient portal and staged biweekly check-in calls utilizing voice modulation and a burner phone. She explicitly instructed my brother that the clinic had a strict, no unapproved visitors policy to protect patients recovering from severe trauma. She confiscated my personal devices and left me with a single, heavily restricted, obsolete tablet that could only connect to her specific phone number. She told Marcus I was completely safe. She told Marcus I was recovering beautifully, and then, slowly, methodically, she began telling Marcus that the trauma of the accident was causing severe cognitive decline. She told him I was experiencing aggressive paranoia, and that seeing family would only trigger catastrophic mental setbacks. The $120,000 went to her mother's failing luxury boutique. It went to exclusive day spas, European designer handbags, and exorbitant country club fees. It went absolutely everywhere except to my medical recovery. But here is the critical variable that Olivia entirely failed to account for. For 8 months, confined to a rusted wheelchair, in a damp, freezing commercial basement, I had not been snuffering, I had been hacking. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, subscribe and hit the notification bell. You will absolutely want to be present for every single chapter of this systematic destruction. Before we proceed, drop a comment below if you have ever stayed completely silent while someone arrogantly assumed they had broken you. My story might radically alter your perspective on the lethal power of silence. I should clarify precisely who I am and what I do for a living. I am not the fragile, eccentric academic my toxic sister-in-law assumes I am. I am a forensic data scientist and a cyber intelligence architect. For the past decade, I have operated in the absolute highest echelons of federal and corporate cybersecurity. I am the apex predator that government agencies quietly deploy when a foreign syndicate attempts to launder billions of dollars through encrypted blockchain networks. I do not analyze superficial data, I dissect the very infrastructure of digital truth. I can reverse engineer a multinational money laundering operation from a single misplaced line of code. My entire career is built on the fundamental principle that every digital action leaves an immutable, permanent trace. Accuracy is not just an aesthetic choice, accuracy is absolute power. You pay attention to the specific metadata that everyone else dismisses. My brother Marcus is a brilliant AI logistics engineer. He is fiercely protective, highly analytical, and entirely consumed by his work. 3 years ago, his startup went public, and he was suddenly worth tens of millions of dollars. He is a phenomenal engineer, but he is hopelessly naive when it comes to predatory human behavior. He married Olivia 2 years ago. Olivia was an interior designer and a self-proclaimed lifestyle influencer with a honey blonde blowout. A laugh that always arrived precisely 2 seconds before it was genuinely earned, and a terrifying talent for making herself the absolute center of gravity in any room without ever raising her voice. She did not yell, she redirected. If a conversation shifted toward my federal contracts or my technical achievements, Olivia would smoothly steer the narrative toward her latest charity luncheon or her kitchen renovations. Olivia fiercely resented my independence. She despised the fact that Marcus respected my intellect. And she was pathologically jealous of the fact that I never needed Marcus's money to survive. I operated in a world of high-level federal clearances that she could not accessorize or post on her social media feeds. The catastrophic catalyst occurred in late October. I was involved in a devastating, multi-vehicle collision on the interstate. The accident completely shattered my right femur, fractured my pelvis, and required 12 hours of intensive reconstructive surgery. I awoke in the ICU with titanium rods permanently bolted into my skeletal structure. The prognosis was brutal. I would require at least 8 months of intensive specialized physical therapy just to walk without a cane. I was temporarily confined to a heavy medical wheelchair, in excruciating pain, and physically vulnerable for the first time in my entire adult life. Marcus was absolutely devastated. He immediately stepped in, insisting on financing the absolute best private rehabilitation care available in the state. He wanted to secure a private, accessible suite at the Elite Summit Recovery Center, a facility that cost roughly $15,000 a month. Because Marcus was in the middle of a massive multi-billion-dollar corporate merger, he simply did not have the bandwidth to manage the logistical snooze of my admission. Olivia, naturally, volunteered to handle everything. I will manage the facility communications, the financial transfers, and the moving logistics. Marcus, Olivia had purred, her voice dripping with weaponized, maternal warmth. You focus on the merger. Elena is family. I will ensure she is treated like royalty. Marcus trusted her completely. Why wouldn't he? She was ruthlessly organized. She generated flawless spreadsheets. She projected the illusion of total competence. I was also heavily medicated, battling severe post-surgical trauma, and completely exhausted. My singular focus was managing the searing physical pain. I allowed Olivia to handle the transition. That was the only mistake I made. On the morning of my scheduled discharge from the hospital, Olivia did not send a specialized medical transport van. She sent 2 massive, intimidating private contractors in an unmarked black cargo van. They loaded my wheelchair into the back. They confiscated my secure federal smartphone, my laptop, and my digital identification tokens, claiming the clinic had strict policies regarding digital detoxification to promote neural recovery. I was heavily sedated during the transport. When the heavy metal doors of the van finally opened, I was not looking at the pristine glass facade of the Summit Recovery Center. I was looking at the rusted, graffiti-covered loading dock of an abandoned commercial warehouse on the absolute edge of the city's industrial grid. The contractors rolled my wheelchair down a steep, cracked concrete ramp through a heavy steel door and directly into the basement vault. The air was damp and smelled intensely of mildew and stagnant water. The room was 12 by 14 feet. It contained a cheap military surplus cot, a broken, sparking space heater, and a single folding table. The concrete walls were entirely uninsulated. The only source of light was a single fluorescent bulb that hummed with a maddening, erratic frequency. Olivia was waiting for me in the basement. She wore a pristine designer trench coat and expensive leather boots, standing in the center of the filth like she was inspecting a minor renovation. "What is this, Olivia?" I demanded, my voice raspy from the heavy painkillers. I gripped the armrests of my wheelchair, my shattered leg throbbing violently in the damp cold. "This is your new reality, Elena," Olivia stated, her voice completely devoid of its usual cloying warmth. The mask had entirely slipped, her eyes were flat and predatory. Marcus transferred $120,000 into an account he believes is controlled by the clinic. It is actually controlled by an LLC I registered last month. I am not going to allow him to waste our family's wealth on your medical pampering. She reached into her designer bag and placed a cheap, obsolete tablet on the folding table. "This tablet is heavily restricted," she explained coldly. "It connects to a localized, throttled cellular network. It has exactly one approved contact. Me, the microphone is permanently disabled. You cannot call Marcus. You cannot access the internet. If you attempt to manipulate the hardware, the internal battery will deliberately short-circuit. I stared at her, analyzing her posture, her pupil dilation, her breathing. She was not acting out of spontaneous malice. This was heavily premeditated. You are committing federal wire fraud and unlawful imprisonment. Olivia, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I did not scream. I did not beg. I analyzed the exact parameters of the threat. I am securing my future. Olivia replied smoothly. A contractor comes once a week to drop off basic groceries and bottled water. He does not speak English, and he is paid in cash. Marcus believes you are heavily sedated in a luxury suite, undergoing intensive neurotherapy that requires absolute isolation. If you attempt to leave this basement, you will simply drag yourself across miles of abandoned industrial concrete. She turned and walked toward the heavy steel door. Enjoy your recovery, Elena. I will inform Marcus that you are feeling a little confused. The heavy steel door slammed shut, the deadbolt engaged with a loud metallic crack. I was completely alone in a freezing basement, unable to walk, stripped of my encrypted communication devices, and legally erased from the grid. Olivia was operating under the toxic assumption that because I was physically broken, my intellect was also neutralized. She believed that stripping me of my customized federal hardware effectively rendered me helpless. She fundamentally misunderstood the nature of my expertise. A master architect does not need a titanium hammer to build a fortress, they just need to understand the structural physics. The first 2 months, November and December, were a masterclass in physical agony. The basement temperature frequently dropped below 40 degrees. The cheap space heater barely functioned. My shattered femur required precise, methodical physical therapy, which I was forced to execute alone on the freezing concrete floor, biting down on a rolled-up towel to muffle my own screams. I lost 15 pounds, my skin became translucent, but every single time I forced myself to stand, every time I dragged my damaged leg across the concrete, my resolve hardened into something indistinguishable from weaponized tungsten. I did not have my federal hardware, but I had the obsolete tablet. Olivia thought she had secured the device. She had installed a rudimentary commercial lockdown software, restricting the operating system to a single proprietary messaging application. It was an amateur-hour implementation. It took me precisely 4 days to bypass the bootloader sequence by manually shorting 2 microscopic pins on the tablet's exposed motherboard using a bent paperclip I extracted from the folding table. I bypassed the firmware lock, rewrote the kernel permissions using a raw command line interface, and liberated the device's internal Wi-Fi antenna. The industrial park was largely abandoned, but the city maintained a massive, high-capacity automated traffic routing server in a junction box 2 miles away. Using a makeshift parabolic antenna, I constructed from aluminum foil and copper wire, salvaged from the broken space heater, I intercepted the municipal Wi-Fi signal. I was back on the grid. I did not immediately contact Marcus. I did not call the local authorities. If I simply called the police, Olivia would claim it was a terrible misunderstanding. Or worse, she would leverage her fabricated medical narrative to claim I was suffering from a paranoid schizophrenic break due to the trauma. She would hire expensive lawyers and tie the truth up in litigation for a decade. I am a forensic data scientist. I do not settle for messy litigation. I settle for absolute, total annihilation. I needed an irrefutable cryptographic timeline of her entire criminal conspiracy. I needed to map every single dollar, every single forged document, and every single lie she had ever transmitted. From a freezing basement, wrapped in a cheap synthetic blanket, I initiated a deep dive, unauthorized penetration of Olivia's entire digital existence. It was embarrassingly easy. Olivia utilized the exact same unencrypted password for her iCloud, her banking portals, and her email servers. Marcus and Olivia 2024. It was a cryptographic joke. By January 15th, I had successfully cloned her entire digital footprint. I established a secure encrypted server partition on a remote federal ghost drive I controlled. Every text message she sent, every bank transfer she authorized, every document she forged was instantly duplicated and archived in my secure vault. I sat in the dark and quietly observed the exact mechanics of her deception. Olivia was running the fraud like a sociopathic project manager. She had indeed registered a fraudulent LLC, Summit Medical Management LLC. The letterhead featured a stolen stock image of a mountain peak. Every month on the 1st, Marcus authorized a $15,000 transfer, court Katsura account to the LLC. The funds were instantly routed into Olivia's personal, hidden offshore checking account. I tracked the disbursements with the cold precision of a surgeon holding a scalpel. She split the stolen funds ruthlessly. $6,000 a month went directly to elegance and grace, her mother's failing luxury boutique in the affluent suburbs, propping up the business from total bankruptcy. $500 went to Olivia's personal expenditures. I logged every single digital receipt. The Azure Elite Day Spa, $900 a month. A specialized dermatologist on Fifth Avenue. A pristine, limited edition Chanel lambskin bag, $200. The remainder sat in a high-yield holding account to cover the cash payments for my weekly, stale groceries, and the utility bills for the abandoned warehouse. She was living in absolute luxury while I was rationing a single bottle of water to ensure I could take my required antibiotics. But the financial theft was only the preliminary weapon. The secondary weapon was the calculated psychological manipulation of my brother. I intercepted all of her communications with Marcus. I watched her methodically build a horrific narrative regarding my mental stability. Marcus, I spoke with the lead neurologist at the clinic today. Olivia texted him on February 12th. They are deeply concerned. Elena is exhibiting severe signs of post-traumatic paranoia. She believes the nurses are trying to poison her. They strongly recommend we do not visit or attempt video calls until they stabilize her medication. It would only trigger a catastrophic setback. Marcus responded 3 minutes later. His text was heartbreakingly sincere. Whatever it takes, Liv. Tell them to spare no expense. I just want my sister back. I love her. Olivia's response. I know, darling, I am handling everything. The doctors say she is comfortable. Just confused. She sent that artificial comfort while actively purchasing a $2,000 pair of designer heels, using the money meant to fix my shattered leg. By March, my physical therapy, executed entirely on my own through sheer agonizing willpower, began to yield definitive results. The bone was knitting, the muscle was rebuilding. I could stand without holding onto the concrete wall. I fashioned a makeshift cane from a heavy piece of industrial piping I found in the corner of the basement. I practiced walking in the dark, measuring my strides, mastering the pain. I was healing, and as my body recovered, the encrypted dossier I was compiling on the remote server expanded into a devastating arsenal of absolute destruction. I did not just capture the bank transfers. I captured the geolocation data of every photograph she sent Marcus, claiming she was visiting the clinic. The metadata definitively proved she was sitting in a high-end wine bar when she claimed to be consulting with my fictional doctors. I captured the specific text messages she exchanged with her mother, Brenda. Brenda was fully complicit. Is Marcus asking questions about the clinic transfers? Brenda texted on March 22nd. He is completely clueless, Olivia replied. He just signs whatever I put in front of him. We have the boutique covered for the next quarter. The crippled freak isn't going anywhere. The crippled freak. I took a screenshot of that specific message. I archived it in a folder labeled Exhibit 41. By early May, I had accumulated exactly 51 meticulously documented exhibits. 51 irrefutable, cryptographically verified proofs of federal wire fraud, medical neglect, forgery, extortion, and criminal conspiracy. I did not need a lawyer to build my case. I had built a digital guillotine. I was merely waiting for the absolute perfect moment to drop the blade. That moment arrived via an intercepted email on May 10th. Marcus's AI logistics firm was hosting the prestigious annual Tech Founders Gala on the final Saturday in May. It was the most highly publicized, ultra-exclusive charity event in the city's corporate calendar. Marcus was scheduled to deliver the keynote address regarding advanced neural networking to an audience of Silicon Valley executives, federal regulators, and venture capitalists. Olivia was fiercely orchestrating her own presence for the event. I intercepted her digital receipts for a custom-tailored $8,000 emerald silk evening gown. She booked a private hair and makeup team to arrive at their estate. She was aggressively preparing to walk the red carpet as the flawless, unconditionally supportive wife of a tech billionaire. She also sent Marcus a text message the morning of the gala. "I just spoke with the clinic director. Elena had a very rough night. She is experiencing severe auditory hallucinations. They had to increase her sedatives. She asked for you, but they said a visit right now would completely derail her progress. I am so sorry, Marcus. I will handle the clinic billing today so you can focus on your speech." She sent that text while drinking a heavily engineered espresso in her massive sunlit kitchen. I read that text while sitting on a damp concrete floor, tightening the makeshift brace on my right leg. My bone had healed sufficiently. I had mastered walking with the heavy industrial pipe. I no longer needed the wheelchair. I had accumulated 51 irrefutable, cryptographically verified exhibits. The digital guillotine was perfectly assembled, the blade was sharpened to an atomic edge, and I was finally ready to release the mechanism. It was time to leave the basement. Olivia believed she had secured me in an impenetrable vault. But Olivia was an interior designer. She understood aesthetics, not physical security. The heavy steel door was secured by a standard commercial deadbolt. It was designed to keep vagrants out, not to keep a federal intelligence architect inside. Using the heavy titanium clip from my obsolete tablet and a piece of wire I extracted from the broken space heater, I systematically tensioned the locking cylinder. It took me exactly 14 minutes of absolute, focused silence to manipulate the internal pins. The deadbolt disengaged with a heavy, satisfying metallic click. I pushed the heavy steel door open. The blinding, unfiltered afternoon sunlight hit my face for the first time in 8 agonizing months. I took a deep breath of actual, unconditioned air. I gripped my industrial pipe, stepped out of the rusted loading dock, and began walking. I did not walk toward the police station. I did not walk toward a hospital. I walked exactly 3 miles through the abandoned industrial grid to a secure, unmarked federal access point I maintained for emergency operational continuity. When you operate in the highest echelons of cyberintelligence, you do not exist on a single grid. You maintain secure secondary infrastructure. I bypassed the biometric scanner at the secure facility, entered the climate-controlled vault, and finally accessed my legitimate, heavily encrypted, federal hardware. The first action I executed was initiating a massive, synchronized data dump of the 51 exhibits. I routed the encrypted files through 3 offshore servers to ensure absolute operational security. My second action was a physical transformation. I utilized the emergency funds in my secure vault to order a custom, tailored black tactical suit. I discarded the rusted industrial pipe and equipped myself with a sleek, aeronautical-grade carbon fiber walking cane. I showered for the first time in 8 months in a high-pressure, heated facility. I washed the damp basement out of my hair. I looked in the mirror. I was significantly thinner, my cheekbones sharp and unforgiving. The trauma had physically altered me, but my eyes were perfectly clear. I did not look like a victim. I looked like an absolute reckoning. I utilized a secure federal printer to produce 3 massive, physical binders. I printed all 51 exhibits on heavy, expensive, high-gloss paper. Every forged document, every geolocation mismatch, every digital receipt, and every vicious text message. I tabbed them, I indexed them, I bound them in black leather. I was not going to send Marcus an email. I was going to drop physical, undeniable weight directly onto a table, in front of hundreds of people. The Tech Founders Gala was held at the Grand Atrium, a massive, glass-enclosed architectural marvel in the center of the financial district. The perimeter was secured by high-end private security. Flashbulbs illuminated the entrance as executives and socialites arrived in a steady stream of luxury vehicles. I arrived at precisely 8:30 in the evening. The private security detail at the main entrance stopped me. I apologize, ma'am, but this is a highly secured private event. I need to see your VIP credentials. I did not argue. I reached into my jacket, bypassed the standard VIP list, and handed the head of security my heavy titanium level 6 federal security clearance token. The security chief swiped the token through his mobile scanner. The screen instantly flashed a brilliant, authorized green, displaying my operational status and a direct override mandate. The color entirely drained from his face. He recognized the clearance level immediately. It was the specific clearance utilized by federal intelligence operatives during active, high-threat domestic operations. My absolute apologies, Dr. Vance. The security chief stammered, stepping back immediately and opening the heavy velvet rope. Please proceed. Do you require an escort? No, I replied, my voice perfectly level. I know exactly where my target is located. I walked into the grand atrium. The room was a sprawling ocean of tailored tuxedos, expensive silk gowns, and aggressively curated corporate elegance. Waiters navigated the floor carrying silver trays of champagne. A string quartet played softly in the background. The chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over the absolute elite of the technology sector. I moved through the crowd smoothly, the rhythmic, heavy click of my carbon fiber cane echoing subtly against the marble floor. People instinctively moved out of my path. There is a specific kinetic energy projected by someone who has survived 8 months in a freezing concrete vault and is currently carrying the digital execution of a sociopath in a black leather binder. The crowd parted like water. I located the primary VIP table at the absolute front of the room, directly adjacent to the main podium. Marcus was sitting at the head of the table. He was wearing a flawless bespoke tuxedo, deeply engaged in a conversation with two prominent venture capitalists. He looked exhausted, the weight of the massive corporate merger clearly visible in the rigid set of his shoulders. Olivia was sitting perfectly beside him, the emerald silk gown draped flawlessly over her frame. Her hair was immaculate. She was holding a crystal flute of champagne, smiling brightly at a senior director, projecting the absolute illusion of the perfect, supportive billionaire's wife. I did not announce myself. I simply walked directly up to the VIP table and stopped precisely behind Olivia's chair. The senior director speaking to Olivia noticed me first. His sentence trailed off into absolute silence. He stared at me, his eyes widening in complete confusion. Olivia noticed the shift in his expression. She turned around slowly, her professional, camera-ready smile still plastered on her face. She looked at my tailored black suit. She looked at my sleek carbon fiber cane. She looked directly into my eyes. For one agonizing, suspended second, the sophisticated algorithms in Olivia's brain attempted to process the impossibility of my physical presence. I was supposed to be a broken, paranoid shell, confined to a rusted basement 3 miles away, incapable of walking, entirely disconnected from the grid. Instead, I was standing in the center of her exclusive gala, looking like a heavily armed federal operative. The color vanished from Olivia's face so rapidly it looked like a catastrophic medical event. True, absolute white, her grip on the crystal champagne flute failed completely. The glass slipped from her fingers, shattering violently against the marble floor. The sharp, explosive sound of breaking crystal cut through the ambient noise of the gala like a gunshot. Marcus turned his head at the sound of the breaking glass. His eyes locked onto me. I watched his brilliant, analytical brain cycle through extreme shock, disbelief, and overwhelming relief in exactly 2 seconds. "Elena?" Marcus breathed, his voice cracking instantly. He shoved his chair back so violently it tipped over, hitting the floor with a loud crash. He did not care. He bypassed the venture capitalists, crossed the space in 2 massive strides, and pulled me into an embrace so tight I could feel the heavy, erratic thud of his heartbeat against my chest. "Elena," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "You're here. How are you here?" "The clinic. Olivia told me you were heavily sedated this morning. She said the paranoia was critical. Are you supposed to be out?" He pulled back, his hands gripping my shoulders. He smelled like expensive cologne and absolute sincerity. He was scanning my face, looking for the phantom signs of the severe psychological trauma Olivia had meticulously fabricated. "I am perfectly lucid, Marcus," I said calmly, my voice projecting clearly over the immediate silence of the VIP table. "My cognitive function is operating at absolute optimal efficiency. I am here to execute a data delivery." Marcus looked confused. "A data delivery? Elena, you should be resting." "The clinic." "I was never at the clinic, Marcus," I interrupted smoothly. The temperature at the VIP table instantly dropped. The venture capitalist stopped speaking. The senior director froze. Olivia finally found her voice. It was high, thin, and vibrating with absolute panic. "Marcus," she stammered, stepping rapidly around the shattered glass. "She is having an episode. The doctors warned us this might happen. She is experiencing a severe paranoid delusion. We need to get her to a quiet room immediately before she causes a scene." "Please, Elena, you are confused." Olivia reached out to grab my arm, attempting to aggressively steer me away from the table. I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice. I simply raised the heavy carbon fiber cane, precisely 2 inches off the floor, and brought it down on the marble with a sharp, echoing crack. "Do not touch me, Olivia," I stated, my voice dropping to a lethal forensic register. "If you make physical contact with me, I will consider it a hostile kinetic action, and I will respond accordingly." Olivia snatched her hand back as if she had been burned. Marcus stepped between us, his engineering brain rapidly attempting to process the conflicting data. His wife was claiming I was experiencing a psychotic break. I was standing perfectly still, projecting the absolute, terrifying calm of a federal interrogator. "Elena, what do you mean you were never at the clinic?" Marcus asked, his voice dropping, the analytical caution bleeding into his tone. "I've been transferring $15,000 a month to the Summit Recovery Center. Olivia has been managing the payments. I have seen the medical reports. You have seen fraudulent documents generated by a sophisticated sociopath," I replied. I unclasped the heavy black leather binder and placed it directly onto the center of the VIP table, right over the expensive floral arrangement. The heavy thud of the binder echoed over the music. "51 exhibits, Marcus," I announced, my voice carrying the absolute, uncompromising weight of empirical truth. "I suggest you open it, Marcus. Do not look at that." Olivia pleaded desperately, her voice escalating in volume. People at the adjacent tables were beginning to turn and stare. "She is deeply unwell. She is fabricating things. It is part of the trauma psychosis." Marcus did not look at Olivia. He looked at me. He was an engineer. He trusted data above all else. He opened the black leather binder. Page 1. The high-resolution photograph I had taken of the rusted, damp basement vault. The broken space heater, the military cot, the leaking pipes, the timestamp and geolocation data clearly printed in the margins, confirming the location was a foreclosed warehouse in the industrial district. "This," I stated, my voice echoing in the absolute silence of the VIP table, "is the luxury alpine rehabilitation clinic you have been funding for 8 months." Marcus stared at the photograph, his jaw muscles tightened violently. Page 2. The official incorporation documents for Summit Medical Management LLC, downloaded directly from the state registry. The primary managing member was clearly listed, Olivia Vance. Page 3. The unredacted banking transfer logs. It showed the $15,000 monthly deposits from Marcus's corporate account entering the LLC, and the immediate systematic routing of those funds into Olivia's hidden offshore checking account. Marcus's schvezzer traced the routing numbers. His breathing became shallow and dangerous. "Elena, what is this?" Marcus whispered, his voice trembling with a terrifying suppressed rage. "That is a heavily documented timeline of federal wire fraud," I replied. Olivia was physically shaking now. Her emerald silk gown looked ridiculous, completely incongruous with the devastating criminal exposure occurring in real time. "Marcus, those are fake. She hacked something. She is paranoid. I can explain everything privately." "Explain." Page 14, Olivia, I commanded sharply. Marcus turned to page 14. It was a spreadsheet detailing the exact disbursements of the stolen medical funds. $6,000 a month to Elegance and Grace, $900 to Azure Elite Day Spa, $6,200 for a Chanel bag. You routed $120,000, intended for my physical rehabilitation, into your mother's failing boutique and your personal luxury expenditures, I stated coldly. While I dragged my shattered femur across a freezing concrete floor, you were receiving deep tissue massages in Buckhead. The senior director sitting at the table audibly gasped. Marcus did not gasp, he went completely still. It was the specific, terrifying stillness of an engineered system permanently shutting down. He turned his head slowly to look at his wife. You put my sister in a basement, Marcus said. His voice was not loud, it was a terrifying, absolute whisper that carried more kinetic force than a scream. Marcus, I was trying to protect our family's assets. Olivia cried, tears aggressively streaming down her perfectly contoured face. The sociopathic mask had entirely shattered, revealing the desperate, cornered predator underneath. She didn't need a luxury clinic. She's a cold, arrogant machine. She would have wasted our money. I was securing our future, the boutique was failing. I had to help my mother. You isolated me, I stated, cutting through her pathetic rationalization. You confiscated my secure communications, you locked me in a vault. And you methodically attempted to convince my brother that my brilliant, highly calibrated mind was fundamentally broken. I leaned forward, resting both hands heavily on the carbon fiber cane. You severely underestimated the architecture of the mind you were attempting to destroy. Olivia, I am a forensic data scientist. You left a digital trail so wide and incompetent a first-year undergraduate could have indicted you. Marcus closed the black leather binder. The sharp snap of the rings closing sounded like a gavel falling in a silent courtroom. He looked at Olivia with the cold, absolute clarity of a man identifying exactly where a critical system had catastrophically failed. There was no love left in his eyes. There was no anger. There was only the clinical detachment of permanent removal. The 51 exhibits, Marcus said to me, his voice perfectly steady. Are they cryptographically verified, triple encrypted, geolocated, and permanently archived on a secure federal server? I confirmed. The metadata is absolutely irrefutable in a court of law. Excellent, Marcus replied. Shenbai turned back to Olivia. Marcus, please, Olivia begged, reaching out to touch his tuxedo jacket. Marcus stepped back, avoiding her touch with absolute disgust. Do not speak to me, Marcus ordered, his voice echoing over the silent gala. Do not attempt to explain, do not attempt to negotiate. Our prenuptial agreement contains a strict, non-negotiable financial fraud clause. Embezzlement of family funds, for undisclosed personal enrichment, constitutes immediate, unilateral grounds for dissolution without a single cent of spousal support. Olivia let out a sharp, devastated sob. I am invoking that clause immediately, Marcus continued ruthlessly. You will not return to my estate tonight. You will not access our shared accounts. I will have a security team pack a single suitcase of your personal clothing and deliver it to your mother's townhouse. Marcus, I am your wife, Olivia shrieked, the panic finally overriding her carefully curated public image. The entire ballroom was now entirely silent, watching the spectacular, real-time disintegration of her empire. You are a hostile vector, Marcus corrected coldly. You are permanently disconnected from my infrastructure. He turned to the head of his private security detail, who had quietly approached the VIP table during the confrontation. Escort this woman off the premises, Marcus ordered. She is no longer authorized to be here. If she resists, contact the local authorities and inform them she is trespassing. The security chief nodded, stepping firmly toward Olivia. Ma'am, it is time to leave. Olivia looked wildly around the room. She looked at the senior director, who immediately averted his eyes. She looked at the venture capitalists, who were staring at her with undisguised contempt. She looked at me, standing tall, supported by a carbon fiber cane, having completely dismantled her entire life with a single, black binder. She had played every manipulative card she possessed, and she had lost catastrophically. Olivia turned and practically ran out of the grand atrium, the emerald silk gown trailing behind her, flanked by two massive security guards. The flashbulbs at the entrance illuminated her desperate, humiliating exit. The silence in the ballroom lingered for exactly 5 seconds. Marcus turned to me, the rigid, cold exterior cracked, and the exhausted brother returned. He reached out and gently touched my arm, carefully avoiding my injured leg. "Elena," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "I am so profoundly sorry I didn't see it. I didn't verify the data. I trusted the system without auditing the logs. You trusted the person you loved." "Marcus," I replied softly, "that is not an engineering flaw, that is humanity, but you will never fail to audit the logs again." "Never again," Marcus swore. He looked at the black binder. "What do we do with this?" "Tomorrow morning, we execute the final command," I said. "We deliver the archive to the federal authorities. We initiate the wire fraud charges, and we permanently shut down Elegance and Grace." The immediate aftermath of the Tech Founders Gala was a masterclass in systematic, engineered destruction. When you attempt to destroy a forensic data scientist, you do not simply fail. You initiate a retaliatory sequence that completely eradicates your operational capacity. By 9 o'clock the following Monday morning, Marcus's elite corporate legal team, alongside two senior partners specializing in high-asset fraud, filed an emergency ex parte motion in state court. The motion did not rely on emotional testimony or hearsay. It relied entirely on the irrefutable, cryptographically verified evidence contained within the 51 exhibits I had provided. The presiding judge reviewed the unredacted banking transfer logs, the offshore account routing numbers, the metadata of the fabricated clinic emails, and the meticulously documented timeline of my forced isolation in the foreclosed warehouse. The judicial response was swift, merciless, and absolute. The court granted an immediate, comprehensive freeze on all of Olivia's financial assets. The temporary restraining order completely severed her access to Marcus's corporate infrastructure, his personal accounts, their joint holding companies, and the sprawling suburban estate she had spent 2 years aggressively renovating. She was legally neutralized before she had even finished unpacking her single suitcase at her mother's townhouse. Simultaneously, I initiated my own specialized counteroffensive. I did not rely solely on the civil courts. Civil litigation is for recovering assets. Federal prosecution is for ensuring permanent structural consequences. I contacted the regional director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Cybercrimes Division, a man who had previously utilized my structural architecture to dismantle a transnational hacking syndicate based out of Eastern Europe. I provided him with the primary digital key to the secure federal server partition containing Olivia's cloned digital footprint. Federal agents do not typically move rapidly on domestic wire fraud cases unless the evidence is absolute and the victim possesses high-level security clearances. I provided both. The encrypted server contained a flawless, time-stamped chain of custody for every single dollar Olivia had illegally rerouted. On Wednesday afternoon, exactly 4 days after the gala, a highly coordinated federal strike team moved on multiple targets. 2 unmarked federal vehicles arrived at Elegance and Grace. Brenda was actively attempting to finalize a massive, desperate liquidation sale, trying to convert the boutique's remaining luxury inventory into liquid cash before the asset freeze expanded to include her business. She was barking orders at her terrified staff, desperately attempting to clear the registers. She did not succeed. The federal agents bypassed the locked front doors, presenting a comprehensive, no-knock search warrant. The warrant specifically cited the $72,000 in stolen medical funds that had been illegally routed into the boutique's operating accounts under the guise of consulting fees. The agents systematically dismantled the boutique. They confiscated the sophisticated point-of-sale systems, the encrypted ledgers, the back-office servers, and the physical inventory. Brenda, the woman who had arrogantly referred to me as a crippled freak via encrypted text message, was escorted out of her own luxury boutique in heavy steel handcuffs. Her face was entirely pale, her carefully constructed suburban aristocracy completely shattered in front of her affluent, whispering clientele. Simultaneously, a second federal team arrived at Brenda's townhouse in Marietta, where Olivia had retreated. Olivia's reaction to the sudden appearance of federal badges was predictable, frantic, and entirely uncalculated. When the agents presented the warrant for her personal electronics and financial records, she immediately reverted to her primary defense mechanism: aggressive, weaponized victimhood. "You cannot do this!" Olivia shrieked at the lead federal agent, clutching her designer robe tightly around her. "My husband is a tech billionaire. This is a massive misunderstanding. His sister is deeply unwell. She is suffering from severe post-traumatic psychosis. She fabricated these documents to destroy my marriage." The lead agent, a 20-year veteran of financial crimes who had spent the previous 48 hours reviewing my flawless forensic data, did not flinch. "Ma'am," the agent stated, his voice devoid of any emotion, "we are executing a federal warrant based on cryptographically verified banking logs. Unless you are suggesting your sister-in-law's psychosis allowed her to successfully infiltrate the Cayman Islands offshore banking network and forge SWIFT transfer authorizations utilizing your specific IP address, I highly suggest you remain silent and contact an attorney." Olivia was not immediately arrested. Federal indictments for complex wire fraud require a formal grand jury presentation, but she was entirely stripped of her digital infrastructure. They confiscated her laptop, her smartphone, her encrypted backup drives, and her physical banking ledgers. Deprived of Marcus's immense wealth and facing imminent federal indictment, Olivia attempted one final, incredibly desperate maneuver. It was a classic sociopathic extortion play, executed with the terrifying incompetence of a cornered amateur. She utilized a cheap, prepaid burner phone to contact a prominent gossip publication specializing in tech industry scandals. She promised them an exclusive, explosive interview, claiming she possessed highly classified, proprietary intellectual property stolen directly from Marcus's AI logistics firm. She threatened to release the proprietary algorithms to his fiercest market competitors, unless Marcus immediately dropped the civil litigation and provided a massive, unrecorded cash settlement of $5 million. She sent the extortion demand via a supposedly secure, encrypted email service based in Switzerland. However, Olivia was an interior designer attempting to play a high-stakes cyber extortion game against a forensic data scientist. She fundamentally failed to comprehend the scope of my initial digital penetration. When I had bypassed her tablet and cloned her digital footprint from that freezing basement, I had not simply passively observed her communications. I had actively secured her entire digital perimeter. I had rewritten the administrative permissions on every single device and cloud account she had ever accessed. The moment Olivia transmitted the extortion email, the automated routing protocols I had established intercepted the data packets. The extortion demand never reached the gossip publication. Instead, it was automatically routed directly to my secure federal server, immediately flagged as a Class A extortion attempt, and instantly forwarded to the lead FBI agent managing her wire fraud case. Olivia had effectively mailed her own confession to a federal investigator. Furthermore, the transmission triggered a dormant, localized script I had embedded deep within her remaining cloud architecture. The script executed flawlessly. It initiated a complete, irreversible, military-grade hard wipe of every single digital asset she still controlled in the cloud. Her iCloud backups, her hidden Dropbox folders, her secondary email accounts, and her synchronized photo streams were simultaneously, permanently erased, overwriting the data sectors 7 consecutive times with randomized cryptographic noise. Decades of contacts, photographs, fake medical documents, and the fabricated extortion material gun in exactly 3 seconds. She was left with absolutely nothing: no leverage, no data, no voice. The divorce proceedings were finalized with unprecedented, brutal velocity. Marcus's attorneys leveraged the prenuptial agreement's fraud clause to absolute perfection. Olivia's court-appointed attorney attempted to argue that the clause was overly broad and punitive. The judge, having reviewed the federal indictment regarding the stolen medical funds, forcefully rejected the argument. Olivia was awarded zero spousal support. She was ordered to completely forfeit her equity in the marital estate, including the massive suburban mansion she had designed. Furthermore, the civil court mandated full restitution of the $120,000 she had embezzled through the fraudulent Summit Medical Management LLC, plus massive punitive damages for intentional infliction of emotional distress and unlawful imprisonment. Because her offshore accounts were permanently frozen by the federal authorities, Olivia had absolutely no means to satisfy the massive civil judgment. The court ordered the immediate liquidation of her remaining personal assets. Her custom emerald silk gown, her Chanel handbags, her jewelry, all of it was auctioned to partially satisfy the restitution order. She was forced to declare complete personal bankruptcy. The federal criminal charges were significantly more devastating than the civil fallout. Faced with 51 exhibits of cryptographically verified metadata, plus the intercepted extortion email, Olivia's defense attorney immediately recommended an unconditional plea arrangement. Going to trial against a federal intelligence architect who had meticulously documented every single forged document, illegal wire transfer, and extortion attempt was legal suicide. In late October, exactly 1 year after my devastating car accident, Olivia formally pleaded guilty to 2 counts of federal wire fraud, 1 count of extortion, and 1 count of criminal conspiracy. Brenda, terrified by the prospect of dying in a federal penitentiary, rapidly turned on her daughter, cooperating fully with the prosecution. She pleaded guilty to receiving stolen property and accessory to wire fraud. During the sentencing hearing, the federal judge specifically referenced the calculated cruelty of the isolation. "You did not merely embezzle funds, Mrs. Vance," the judge stated, looking down from the bench at Olivia, who was trembling violently in a cheap, untailored gray suit that did not fit properly. "You actively weaponized this woman's physical vulnerability. You isolated her in a derelict structure and systematically attempted to convince her family that her highly calibrated mind was failing. You engineered a sophisticated psychological torture, utilizing the stolen to finance a lavish lifestyle. The level of sociopathic calculation is staggering." Olivia was sentenced to 60 months in a federal correctional facility, with no possibility of early parole. Brenda received a 36-month sentence. They were assigned to separate maximum security facilities located in different states. The toxic, codependent mother-daughter dynamic that had engineered my imprisonment was permanently severed by the federal penal system. They had spent 2 years attempting to isolate me. They would now spend the next half-decade experiencing absolute, institutional isolation, completely deprived of the luxury and status they worshipped. As for me, my physical recovery progressed exponentially once I was permanently removed from the damp, freezing environment of the warehouse. Marcus insisted I move into the secure, fully accessible guest wing of his massive estate. He hired the absolute best private physical therapists in the country. For the first 2 months, he personally attended every single physical therapy session. He watched me endure the agonizing, repetitive, brutal exercises required to rebuild the atrophied muscle mass around my titanium-reinforced femur. He did not speak during those sessions. He just watched, his brilliant engineering brain silently calculating the massive, agonizing physical cost of his previous naive trust. "I should have verified the location, Elena," Marcus said one evening, sitting in my recovery suite while I iced my leg, watching the swelling subside. "I should have audited the medical reports. I built a billion-dollar AI routing system, but I couldn't see that the woman sleeping next to me was running a basic, amateur, fraudulent shell company. You operate under the assumption that the people closest to you share your foundational operating principles." "Marcus," I replied, adjusting the heavy brace on my knee. "That is not a bug in your programming. That is a required feature of human connection. If you constantly verify the metadata of everyone you love, you become a machine." "You are not a machine." Olivia was the anomaly. Marcus nodded slowly, the guilt still heavy in his eyes. She exploited the system, and we patched the vulnerability. I stated firmly, offering him a small, reassuring smile. The threat has been permanently neutralized. The architecture is secure. My brother had learned the most brutal, unforgiving lesson of predatory behavior. The most dangerous threats do not arrive via an encrypted, anonymous server from a hostile nation-state. They arrive wearing designer clothing, speaking with a warm, maternal cadence, and holding a perfectly chilled glass of champagne in your own living room. By late December, 14 months after the accident, I was finally able to walk without the carbon fiber cane. My gait was slightly altered, a permanent physical signature of the trauma, but I was fully mobile, completely independent, and entirely lethal. I did not immediately return to the high-pressure, exhausting environment of constant federal field operations. The 8 months in the basement had fundamentally altered my perspective on vulnerability, structural power, and the terrifying ease with which domestic predators operate in the shadows. I wanted to build something permanent, something that actively neutralized predators before they could isolate their targets. I utilized a significant portion of the massive civil restitution funds recovered from Olivia's offshore accounts to execute a highly symbolic, uncompromising acquisition. I purchased the exact, foreclosed industrial warehouse where Olivia had imprisoned me. I did not demolish it. I completely gutted the decaying structure and heavily retrofitted the architecture. I installed reinforced steel support beams, state-of-the-art climate control systems, and high-capacity, encrypted fiber optic networking cables. I transformed the massive, echoing industrial space into an elite, highly secure cybersecurity training facility. The primary operational mandate of the facility is to recruit and train brilliant, highly analytical young women from disadvantaged backgrounds. We do not teach them basic coding, we teach them advanced forensic data science, cryptographic verification, and the structural mechanics of absolute digital security. We teach them how to identify anomalies, how to audit the logs, and how to systematically dismantle predatory systems before they cause catastrophic damage. I named the facility the Vault, the specific 12 by 14-foot concrete basement, where I had spent 8 months freezing on a military cot, was intentionally preserved, but heavily modified. I removed the rusted steel door. I installed high-intensity, full-spectrum LED lighting. I lined the concrete walls with massive, high-resolution server arrays and dual-monitor tactical workstations. It is now the primary command center for our advanced penetration testing cohort. Where I once sat shivering in the dark, utilizing a bent paperclip and an obsolete tablet to map a sociopath's criminal conspiracy, brilliant young women now sit in ergonomic chairs, utilizing cutting-edge federal hardware to reverse engineer massive, hostile network intrusions. They learn the exact same lesson I learned in that dark freezing room. The most powerful weapon you can possess in a world full of loud, arrogant noise is absolute, unbroken silence. If you are watching this, and you are currently trapped in a situation where someone is actively attempting to convince you that you are fundamentally broken, confused, or powerless, I need you to listen to me with absolute unwavering focus. Do not yell. Do not attempt to aggressively justify your reality to someone who is actively manufacturing your destruction. A sociopath utilizes your emotional distress as a primary fuel source. When you scream, you validate their narrative that you are unstable. Instead, you must become entirely silent. You must become a forensic architect of your own reality. Document every single anomaly, map the exact parameters of the deception, gather the empirical data with the cold, absolute precision of a machine analyzing a structural failure. Do not confront them when you have a theory. Confront them when you possess the encrypted, irrefutable metadata. Silence is not surrender. Silence is a highly secured perimeter. It is the impregnable fortress where you methodically assemble the digital guillotine. You wait for the absolute perfect moment. You wait until they are completely comfortable, wearing their expensive silk, drinking their champagne, standing in the absolute center of their fabricated empire. And then, without raising your voice, without a single drop of visible emotion, you drop the physical binder on the table. You execute the final command, you release the blade. Until next time, stay vigilant. Stay analytical, and never ever let them see you compiling the data. There is one final detail regarding the operational architecture of this retaliation that I have not yet disclosed. When you engineer a structural collapse, you must ensure the debris does not reconstruct itself. Predators like Olivia and Brenda are incredibly resilient. If left to their own devices, they would immediately begin attempting to manipulate the guards and the administration. They would attempt to re-establish their toxic hierarchies. I anticipated this behavioral pattern, therefore, I ensured their federal sentencing guidelines were heavily influenced by the extreme medical abuse they inflicted upon a highly cleared federal operative. Olivia was not sent to a minimum security facility. Due to the high-dollar extortion attempt, she was assigned to a medium-high security federal penitentiary in the Nevada desert. I audited her institutional behavioral logs 6 months into her sentence. The data was intensely satisfying. Without her designer clothing or her ability to gaslight naive victims, Olivia was entirely powerless. She attempted a smear campaign against her cellmate during her first month. Her cellmate did not respond to passive-aggressive whispering. She responded with immediate physical dominance. Olivia spent 3 weeks in solitary confinement for her own protection. She currently works in the institutional laundry facility, earning 12 cents an hour. Brenda is serving her third 6 months in upstate New York. The woman who once loudly complained about hotel linens is now sleeping on a plastic mattress. Her commissary account is entirely empty because the federal asset freeze liquidated every single dollar she had hidden. The boutique was completely auctioned off by the federal government. The space is now occupied by a discount cellular provider. In contrast, the legacy of the vault is expanding exponentially. Our first graduating cohort consisted of 24 exceptional young women. Every single one of them was aggressively recruited by top-tier cybersecurity firms before they formally graduated. One of our top analysts recently identified a massive vulnerability in a municipal banking grid, preventing a multi-million-dollar ransomware attack. When she brought the compiled data to my executive office located precisely on the floor above the preserved concrete basement, I reviewed the flawless, heavily annotated logs. The architecture of the attack was completely hidden, she explained confidently. But they left a tiny anomaly in the metadata. Accuracy is absolute power, I reminded her. You pay attention to the specific metadata that everyone else dismisses, she repeated, reciting the foundational doctrine of the vault. Marcus is the primary philanthropic backer of the facility. He visits every Friday afternoon. He sits in my office, watching the massive monitors display the real-time defensive operations of our students. We do not discuss Olivia. We discuss data, logic, and the future. The nightmare they attempted to construct for me did not break my mind. It forced me to recompile my operating system into something permanently immune to their poison. You cannot destroy a forensic architect by isolating her in the dark. You simply provide her with an environment completely free of distractions, allowing her to build the perfect digital guillotine. Stay safe, stay precise, audit the logs, and always remember, silence is never a void. It is the impregnable fortress where you meticulously prepare your ultimate victory. Until next time, never let them see you coming.